The cold came early to Pittsburgh that November, reaching inside the bones of Kessler Medical Devices the way cold always did in that building, quietly through concrete walls and old ductwork that Derek Pruitt knew better than most people know their own homes. He was on the 4th floor before 6 in the morning, pushing his maintenance cart past sealed conference rooms and darkened offices, moving through the kind of stillness that belongs to a building before anyone in charge arrives to fill it with urgency. His boots left soft tracks on the polished hallway tile. His breath came out in small, pale clouds, because the heating system on the northeast wing was running slow again, and he had already filed 3 work orders about it in the past month that no one upstairs had approved. He had gotten Nell fed and dropped at before care by 5:30. She had been half asleep in the passenger seat, her Spider-Man backpack wedged between her knees, hair still damp from where he'd tried to comb it quickly in the bathroom mirror. She had not complained. She never did. That was the thing about Nell that made his chest tighten in a way he couldn't fully name. At 9 years old, she had already learned how to wait quietly for things to get better. He told himself he would fix the northeast heating issue himself today, off the clock if he had to. Inside the executive conference suite at the end of the hall, lights had been on since before Derek arrived. He could see it through the gap under the door, the warmer, more expensive light that executive rooms always seemed to have. Voices behind the glass were controlled but tight, the kind of voices that happen when important people are holding their panic together with both hands. Derek paid no attention. He had learned a long time ago not to watch what happened behind closed doors on the executive floor. He parked his cart near the ventilation access panel outside the server room adjacent to the suite. The quarterly filter maintenance was overdue. He unlatched the panel, pulled the old filter, noted the gray-black buildup that meant it had been running clogged for at least 6 weeks, and reached for the replacement. That was when the conference room door opened sharply, and a sheet of paper drifted out from the motion and landed face up near his cart. He almost slid it back under the door without looking. Almost. But one line of text near the bottom of the page caught his eye the way a wrong sound catches your ear in a quiet room. Not because you were looking for it, but because something in you already knew it didn't fit. A device serial number range through SPS 40844. Derek stared at it, his hands stopped moving. Those were Line 4 units. He had been inside those machines 11 days ago. He had pulled and replaced the calibration sensors on the ultrasonic sterilization test bed himself, using the updated firmware the manufacturer had pushed in October. He had logged it. He had tested it. He had signed the maintenance sheet and left a copy with the shift supervisor because that was the protocol. The failure rate printed next to that serial range was 4.7%. He knew that number was wrong, not outdated, not misremembered. Wrong the way a broken gauge is wrong, not giving you a bad reading but giving you someone else's reading entirely. Inside the conference room, a woman's voice said, "Once we sign the consent decree, the FDA timeline becomes fixed. We lose operational flexibility for at least 18 months. Derek picked up the page. He should have slid it back under the door. He knew that. A maintenance tech had no business holding executive compliance documents. He was very aware of exactly how clearly that fact would be pointed out to him the moment anyone on the other side of that door noticed him. He knocked anyway. The door opened to the face of Alex Strom, Kessler's COO, a man who had the unhurried expression of someone who had never once in his professional life been interrupted by anyone wearing a uniform without a collar. "This floor is restricted before 7, Alex said. Behind him, a long conference table held 8 people in dark business dress, legal binders, laptops, coffee cups going cold. And at the head of the table, Gwen Alderton, Kessler Medical Devices CEO, who had run the company for 6 years after inheriting it from her father, who had built it from a 2-room calibration lab in 1987 into something that employed 3,200 people across 4 states. She was looking at Derek not with dismissal, but with the careful attention of someone who had learned that silence from unexpected sources occasionally meant something. "Sir," Derek said. He kept his voice level. He knew what his voice meant in rooms like this. The serial range on this page. It's SPS 4011 through 40844. Those are Line 4 units, that 4.7% failure figure, that's from pre-calibration testing. The updated firmware was installed on October 14th. The post-calibration numbers are different. Alex's expression shifted from impatience to something more deliberate. "You service the machines." "Yes, sir." "And you're here to tell this room that you disagree with a federal compliance audit." Derek did not look away. I'm here because the serial numbers on that page match machines I was inside 11 days ago, and the failure rate printed next to them doesn't match the test results from after I replaced the sensors. Someone at the table shifted, not much, but Gwen noticed it. What's your name? Gwen asked. Derek Pruitt. How long have you been with Kessler? 4 years. Alex stepped forward. Gwen, the consent decree was reviewed by 3 outside firms. This is not the appropriate. Bring the calibration logs, Gwen said, not to Alec. Derek looked at her steadily. I can pull them from the maintenance system in about 4 minutes. Then go get them. He came back with a printed log sheet and a tablet from the tool cart. The maintenance system was not fancy. It was an 8-year-old interface that IT had promised to upgrade twice. But it was precise because Derek had made it precise, entering every job by hand with timestamps and sensor readings, because that was the kind of work he did. He set the tablet on the edge of the conference table and pointed to the entry dated October 14th. A younger analyst named Jamie, seated near the middle of the table, pulled the tablet closer and began cross-referencing it against the audit file on her laptop. The room was quiet enough that Derek could hear the rain start outside. Fine Pittsburgh rain, the kind that never quite decides what it wants to be. The audit references pre-firmware test data, Jamie said, slowly at first, then with more certainty as she typed. The updated test run from October 19th is not included in the compliance package. Alex stood up. There are procedural reasons for citing baseline data during an active regulatory review. That is standard industry practice. Jamie did not look up from her screen. The October 19th failure rate for this serial range is 0.31%. No one moved. The FDA's acceptable threshold for the Steripulse system was 0.5%. Alex's voice lost its unhurried quality for the first time. That single data set does not override a comprehensive audit. But it should be in the comprehensive audit, Gwen said. Her voice had gone very quiet. Why isn't it? What followed was not dramatic the way movies make things dramatic. It was quieter and worse than that. Jamie and 2 other analysts began pulling linked documents, while Alec provided explanations that arrived a half-second faster than they should have for things supposedly being recalled from memory. Each answer was smooth, technically defensible, and somehow slightly insufficient, like watching someone carefully place stepping stones across water they didn't want anyone to see beneath. Derek stood near the wall. He had been told he could wait outside. He had stayed because Gwen hadn't rescinded the instruction, and because the serial numbers on those pages were still wrong, and because somewhere underneath all of it, he felt the particular unease of a man who has seen something that cannot be unseen. He thought about Nell, about the fact that 3,200 Kessler employees had children of their own who needed to be picked up at fixed hours, about the woman in line 2 shipping who always waved at him when he passed her station, whose name was Margaret, who had worked at Kessler for 19 years. He was not thinking about himself. He had stopped making decisions based on what was good for himself a long time ago. That was partly why he was still wearing a maintenance uniform at 41. Jamie stopped typing. The compliance report was modified, she said. Her voice was careful, the voice of someone choosing words in a room full of people who would remember them. The October 19th test data exists in the system archive. It was excluded from the executive summary document. The modification timestamp is 11:47 p.m. 2 nights ago. Alex said immediately, final formatting edits are common before major submissions. Gwen's eyes moved to him, at 11:47 at night. Compliance doesn't keep bankers' hours. Whose credentials authorized the edit? A pause, small enough to miss, large enough that Derek didn't. Mine, Alex said, as I oversee final submission approvals. Gwen leaned back in her chair. She looked at the consent decree sitting on the table in front of her, then at the calibration log, then at Alec. Pull everything from the last 60 days, she said to Jamie. Every linked document in the compliance chain. Alec's arms crossed over his chest. You're going to delay a federal consent agreement because of maintenance logs. I'm going to delay a federal consent agreement because someone edited a compliance report at midnight and didn't tell me. The next 40 minutes moved the way crises move when truth is being unearthed in real time. Not through a single revelation, but through many small ones, each arriving before the last could fully settle, each adding weight to a shape that was becoming impossible to deny. A second analyst surfaced an email chain buried in the compliance team's shared drive, correspondence between Alec and a consultancy called Remora Advisory Group. The emails referenced timeline acceleration and strategic positioning in language vague enough to read as corporate boilerplate until you read it in context. In context, it read differently. A third analyst pulled Remora's registration records. The consultancy had been incorporated 8 months ago. Its listed address was a registered agent office in Delaware. Two of its three principals were former senior executives at Belcourt Capital Partners, a private equity firm that specialized in acquiring distressed medical device assets at below-market valuations. Gwen sat very still. Derek said nothing. He had said what he'd come to say. The rest of this was not his to carry. But Gwen looked at him anyway. "You knew something was wrong before you knocked on that door," she said. It was not quite a question. "I knew the number didn't match what I'd seen with my own hands," Derek said. "I didn't know why." "How did you see it that fast?" "Most people would have set that page down and walked away." He answered honestly because he was too tired for anything else. "I built those sensor calibration specs, the original ones. At Ohio State, I was working on ultrasonic sterilization measurement systems before." He stopped, rephrased, "before I left the program." Jamie looked up from her screen. Alec, who had gone quiet in the last several minutes, turned slowly toward Derek. There was something new in his expression, not surprise, but recalculation. "You were in biomedical engineering," Gwen said. "Graduate track. I left when my wife got sick." He didn't say Cecile's name in that room. Some names were not for boardrooms. The hospital bills came first. Then they stopped being enough either way. After she died, I needed work with fixed hours. Nell was 4. She needed me home at the same time every day. Not approximately, exactly. No one at the table spoke. The rain tapped steadily against the glass. "So you became a maintenance technician," Gwen said. "It's honest work," Derek said. "The hours are fixed and the machines don't lie to you." Alec made a short sound, not quite a laugh, but close enough. "And now you're auditing a federal compliance submission." "No," Derek said. "I'm telling you what I know about machines I serviced with my own hands. That's all I'm doing." Gwen called outside legal counsel at 7:43. Two attorneys arrived by 8:15. By 9, a separate forensic review of the compliance package had begun in a conference room 2 floors down, and Alex Strom had been asked, politely, but not by anyone who left room for interpretation, to remain available in the building. He remained available for approximately 22 minutes before corporate security intercepted him near the elevator, personal laptop under one arm, moving with the practiced calm of someone who had already decided where they were going. Derek did not see any of that directly. Gwen had moved him to a smaller room down the hall, given him coffee that was actually hot, and asked him to write out everything he could recall about the Line 4 maintenance in October, every date, every sensor reading, every conversation with the shift supervisor. He wrote 4 pages in careful, precise handwriting. Engineering handwriting, the kind that lines up its figures in columns without being asked. When he brought the pages back to the main boardroom, the picture had sharpened considerably. Alec had been in contact with Belcourt Capital for 6 months. The consent decree, as structured, would have required Kessler to suspend manufacturing operations during an extended monitoring period, FDA standard procedure. That suspension, combined with the reputational weight of an active enforcement action, would have compressed Kessler's valuation low enough for Belcourt to move on its Steripulse patents and associated IP at a fraction of what they were actually worth. 3,200 people, 4 states, 19 years of Margaret's career. All of it balanced against a number that Derek Pruitt had recognized from a page he almost hadn't picked up. Gwen set the unsigned consent decree on the corner of the table. She folded it once and placed it in a separate folder and wrote "Hold" across the top in black marker. "We file the corrected compliance package with FDA by the end of the week," she said to legal counsel, "with the full calibration data, unmodified and complete." She looked at the attorneys. "I want to understand every option we have regarding Mr. Strom and the Remora correspondence." "There are several," the lead attorney said. "Good, let's understand all of them." At 11:20, Gwen asked Derek to come back to the main boardroom. The room was quieter now, fewer people. The crisis atmosphere had shifted into something more deliberate. The organized aftermath of a disaster stopped before it fully arrived. Gwen stood near the window where gray November light was trying and mostly failing to brighten the Pittsburgh skyline. She looked tired in the human way, the kind that comes from holding yourself together for 6 hours in front of people who needed you to look certain. "I want to be honest with you," she said. Derek waited. "What you did this morning is the reason 3,200 people still have jobs tonight." She said it plainly, without performance. "I'm not going to pretend that's a small thing." "I saw a number that didn't fit," Derek said. "That's all it was." "You keep saying that." "Because it's the truth." Gwen looked at him for a long moment. The compliance specifications in this morning's documents contained measurement frameworks you developed 12 years ago at Ohio State. Jamie found the original research paper in about 8 minutes. He looked at her steadily. Your team is thorough. It's a good team. She opened a folder on the table and slid a single sheet toward him. It was a job description. Quality Systems Coordinator, Kessler Medical Devices. He read the title, then the reporting structure, then stopped at the salary line, which was different from his current pay by a margin that made something tighten quietly in his throat. I want you to consider it, Gwen said. He looked up from the page. I pick up Nell every day at 3:45. Then you leave at 3:45. Some mornings she's sick, stomach stuff mostly. She's 9. Then you work from wherever you are until she's better. He looked back at the page. He was quiet for a moment, not performing reluctance, actually thinking. Before I answer, he said, the overnight maintenance crew has been running 3 people short since August. That's been in the work order system 4 times. Nobody's moved on it. He looked at her directly. Those are people doing double shifts without extra pay because there's nobody else. That gets fixed before anything else. Gwen held his gaze. Done, she said. And a health baseline review for Line 3 and Line 4 floor staff. Respiratory and auditory. They've been working adjacent to those ultrasonic beds without current documentation for 2 years. Also done. He looked at the job description once more. He folded it carefully and placed it in his front shirt pocket over the Kessler maintenance logo that had been there for 4 years. I'll let you know by Friday, he said. Something crossed Gwen's face. Not surprise, but a kind of recognition. The kind you have when you finally see something described accurately that you'd been looking at imprecisely for a long time. That's fair, she said. At 3:47, 2 minutes late because the east elevator was running slow and he had already made a note to file a work order. Derek Pruitt walked out of Kessler Medical Devices into the Pittsburgh afternoon. The rain had stopped. The air smelled of wet concrete and the beginning of winter. His left shoulder ached where he'd knocked it against the server room panel in the early morning rush, and the coffee from the boardroom had been the only thing in his stomach since 6 a.m., and somewhere across the city his daughter was standing outside Carver Elementary, waiting for the sound of his truck. He found Nell under the school's overhang, not quite in the remaining drizzle but not entirely out of it either, talking animatedly to a girl from her class about something that involved. From the hand gestures, an encounter with a spider somewhere near the library. Nell looked up when she heard the truck and ran the last 20 feet without being called. She hit him in the midsection at a speed he hadn't fully braced for and held on. You're late, she said into his jacket. I know, long day. She pulled back and looked at him with the direct, uncomplicated appraisal that 9-year-olds deliver without softening anything. There was a smudge of something purple near her left ear. He didn't ask. Did something happen? She said. Yeah, something happened. Bad something or okay something? He thought about the consent decree sitting in the hold folder. He thought about 3,200 people, and Margaret in line 2 shipping with her 19 years, and a folded job description in his shirt pocket. Okay something, he said. It worked out. Nell considered this, then gave one short nod. The nod she used when she accepted an answer as complete and accurate. She took his hand and turned toward the truck, backpack listing off one shoulder. Did they need you today? She asked. He looked down at the top of her head, still damp somehow, probably the water fountain, she was always doing that, and said quietly, yeah, bug. They really did. She seemed satisfied with that. She climbed into the passenger seat and immediately launched into the full account of the spider, which had apparently been very large and had caused significant disruption near the biography section. He listened the whole way home. 3 floors above the Level 2 shipping station at Kessler Medical Devices, Gwen Alderton stood at the large window in her office and watched the parking lot empty in the November dusk. Legal was still working. The FDA notification would go out tomorrow morning. The matter of Alex Strom had moved by late afternoon from Human Resources to General Counsel to the first quiet conversations with outside investigators. 3,200 people were driving home tonight without knowing they had come within 2 hours of not having jobs to come back to. On her desk next to the hold folder sat Derek Pruitt's 4 handwritten pages, precise columns, sensor readings dated and timed to the minute. The handwriting of someone trained to be exact who had never stopped being exact, regardless of what title was printed on the badge clipped to his uniform. She picked up one of the pages and read it again, not for the information, which she had already read 3 times, but because it looked like the kind of thing that deserved to be kept somewhere careful. Except she already knew he would find that embarrassing, and probably wrong. She set it back down. Outside, the last of the daylight dissolved into city glow. Somewhere across Pittsburgh, a maintenance technician with an engineering degree and a daughter named Nell was probably making dinner and listening to a story about a spider. Gwen thought about her father, who had built this company in a 2-room calibration lab, and who had told her once that the people who understood the machines best were almost never the ones sitting in the meetings about the machines. She hadn't fully believed him then. She did now.